It's time for the terrific Tuesday trio of MPs to give their slightly biased views on the hot issues of the day. Here they are. Marco Mendicino is a Toronto Liberal MP. Karen Vecchio is a Conservative MP from southwestern Ontario who has her mother, father, and sister watching us from the sidelines here. Nikki Ashton is an NDP MP representing Northern Manitoba. Welcome to you all again.
Bring your family to work day.
I know. Isn't it great?
That's great.
This guy means you'll behave, right?
Yeah.
Attendance. Our friends at Huffington Post, Thea Rush, did the calculation. Turns out Trudeau's missed 58% of question periods in the last year. Harper in his last year was away 46% of the time. About 2/3, though, were out of town or meeting with visiting dignitaries. So Trudeau gets a pass on 2/3. But it sounds like he's away a lot. Nikki, remember Jack Layton going after Michael Ignatieff in 2011? Does attendance matter anymore, or does the public say, better things are to be done off the Hill?
It does, absolutely. I mean, you know, Prime Minister Trudeau did commit to real change, committed to transparency, and being in question period matters when you want to be transparent, when you want to be accountable, and he's simply not there. I mean, we've got some really tough questions these days, whether it's pay for cash for access, you know, on the ethics front, whether it's in terms of pipeline politics, whether it's in terms of growing unemployment, and the Prime Minister is simply not there to answer the question. Obviously, it's bad news for us parliamentarians, but most of all for Canadians.
Karen, what's your take on this?
I absolutely agree with Nikki on this. And actually, I'd like to see what the data is for the last 2 months since we're back in the fall session, because I think 56 is kind of low for that, because I know it's been a lot worse, especially since those tough questions are coming out.
He has reasons at times. You know,
yeah,
he's traveling.
I recognize that, you know, you can only schedule a meeting at 2:15 and everything else is open that day. But let's be real here. He is supposed to be accountable to the Canadians in his open and transparent government. He said that Parliament being there in the House is important, yet he's not showing up himself. So once again, we just see a guy that is being thrown away.
Do you like having your leader away more than almost 60% of the time, Mark?
Well, I like seeing him in the House of Commons where he is accountable to Canadians, where he talks about the tax cuts which we've given to 9 million Canadians and the Canada Child Benefit Plan, which is benefiting 9 out of 10 families.
You get that in every
our action
week,
on climate change, well, because these things matter to hardworking Canadians.
Okay.
And so to try and listen to the opposition say that, you know, he's not hard at work, or that our entire caucus is not hard at work, I think really misconstrues the facts. And it's true that there are occasions where he's not in the House, but he is also working with our partners and our friends abroad, whether it's at international conferences or whether it's with friends like the United States. We're working on international trade, we're working on security. Those issues matters as well to Canadians. So the Prime Minister works very hard, and I think all Canadians would agree with that.
Harper worked hard. I'm sure people wouldn't be able to argue that. He did. You know, you look back even before that, Chrétien and Martin worked hard. Martin had so many priorities, he was probably busy 24 hours a day. I mean, what's different now?
Well, I'm not here to dispute whether or not Mr. Harper worked hard. The question was whether or not we see the Prime Minister working, and he works both in the House when he is answering questions during question period, as well as outside of the House. And I have to tell you, this was something that I saw during the course of the campaign, and that I have seen since becoming a member of Parliament. I have rarely seen somebody with the work ethic that the Prime Minister displays day in and day out.
I guess, Nikki, if this goes to the heart of our democracy, is time better spent out there in the community, out there meeting with world leaders, or is it better spent sitting in a question period where it's more or less theater?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's no question there is work to be done outside the House, but, you know, even we talked about travel. This is a Prime Minister that has not shown up to the Arctic, so Canada's north, since he got elected. That's a real problem. I mean, you know, we're fighting for the Port of Churchill, for example, but our Prime Minister hasn't bothered to show up there or further north. Whereas, you know, to give Stephen Harper credit, he would do these yearly tours, right? We're seeing none of that. So we see a Prime Minister who spends a lot of time abroad, who's spending a lot of time outside the House, and who clearly is avoiding tough questions in the House. And as for, you know, hearing what hardworking Canadians want people to show up for work. And our Prime Minister is not doing that in the place where people value it most.
Quick point, and you two are new, but Harper did sort of start the tradition, if it is, of not showing up on Mondays. No one ever showed up for Fridays, but Mondays. So it was down to 3 days a week. Now it's down to 2 days a week. I don't know. Is it time to reconsider Michael Chong's plan to say, look, we have one question period a week. where the Prime Minister answers every single question that's put on the floor of the House of Commons. Is that still a good idea in your view, Karen?
You know, I haven't really looked at it, but I think it's always important that we do have somebody there and accountable. Whether it's I mean, every single day there's new issues. Lately, they've just been compounding on certain topics, but there's always something new. And in Canada, it's a very busy country, and the world is a very busy place. So I think right now, I do like the question period every day. We'll have to see what the balance would be and what it looks like.
I think it's got merit to think one day a week, put Trudeau on the hot seat for the whole.
Well, I
50 minutes.
mean, I return to where I began on this topic, which is that I see the Prime Minister answer questions every day. I mean, unfortunately, some of the questions are duplicative, and there's a lot of repetition, and I think that's why many Canadians do tend to tune out. But there can be no question that the Prime Minister is accountable when he attends during question period, and he is also working very hard when he is outside of the House of Commons.
All right, let's move on. Pipeline disruptions are big in the States. We've seen Standing Rock block a pipeline, or at least delay construction. Yesterday, or recently, that Jim Carr, the Natural Resources Minister, said that he felt police and military should be used to remove these protesters and unplug the obstruction. Today, the Natural Resources Minister had this to say. Here's the clip.
I didn't choose my words carefully last week, and I regret that. The point I wanted to make was that one of those characteristics of Canada that makes us such a special country is that we have not only tolerance for dissent, but we embrace dissent because it is an essential characteristic of who we are to be Canadian. And I also wanted to make the point that civil disobedience and peaceful protest is very much a part of our history, and I should have left it at that.
Karen, I'll start with you on this. Kelly Leach, one of your leadership things, says that agitators and activists should be locked up. Jim Carr seems to be backing away from that idea. What do you do, though, if you have a lawfully approved pipeline going through an area where protesters are determined to stop it? How do you unblock that?
Well, I think part of it is an approach with balance. We have to recognize if it's a peaceful protest, they have the right to protest that. Mm-hmm. Some of the people felt that their voices weren't heard, and they have the right to say that. At the same time, work needs to be done. But we saw a very quick reaction from the minister on this, saying that, you know, stop it now. I think it was very quick to intervene, but at the same time, they have the right to voice their opinions, and that's what has to happen. At the same time, let's look at what is the length of time in which it is slowing down the work that needs to be done as well. This is about getting Canadians back to work, something that we haven't seen in the past year. So I think we need to make sure that there is a balance there, but I don't know if calling in the military on day one is the appropriate measures.
I can almost see you doing one of these protests, Nikki. Maybe I'm vividly imaginative here, but what do you think should be done? How long do you let these things block something that's lawfully proceeding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, I would certainly stand in solidarity along with all my NDP colleagues, you know, with those that are opposing Kinder Morgan, for example.
She's going to jail.
But look, I mean, you know, the government approved Kinder Morgan on Tuesday, and 2 days later, the Minister of Natural Resources is talking about bringing in the police and the military. That is completely unacceptable. That's incendiary language. Now, he's walked back from it today, a number of days later. Actually, his colleagues walked back from it within hours. But, I mean, this kind of language is totally unacceptable. And frankly, in the age of Standing Rock, where we saw peaceful protests, but very firm protests, it's clear that that does make a difference. Certainly, the Army Corps heard them. President Obama heard them. And those kinds of messages are certainly coming to Canada. And it's important for our political leaders to respect those kinds of messages, respect Indigenous rights. And sadly, with that kind of language, it doesn't seem like Minister Carr does that.
But let me stick with you just 1 second. You respect it, but at some point in time, do you move it?
Well, I mean, I think what's important is that political leaders listen to these messages, and what we're hearing from Indigenous leaders is that their rights are being disrespected. And in fact, the government isn't respecting the duty to consult, and that legally is a real issue that needs to be broached. But what's clear is this kind of message is threatening, is incendiary, and has no place in coming from our leadership.
Marco.
Well, the minister has acknowledged today in very clear language the value of dissent, and that we embrace it as we have always done in the finest traditions of our democracy. He reached out to a member of the First Nations community, I believe the chief of the Akwesasne Nation, to express those sentiments, and the call went very well. And today, when the Prime Minister attended the AFN conference, he received a standing ovation. So look, we are very, very committed to working with the First Nations community on the pipelines issues. I agree with some of the sentiments expressed that we do need balance on this topic. We don't hear any balance from the opposition. We have one party that would build all the pipelines without any regard to the environment or climate change, and we have another who would build none. And so what Canadians want is balance, and we have taken that approach here. There are many, many different views. We have to respect them, and we will. And I think that going forward, we'll see a balance and a reconciliation between the environment and the economy.
All right, your parents are, you get the last word, 30 seconds or less.
On this topic
Yeah.
specifically? Well, yeah, bonus round. I look at it and it's funny because we know that some of the pipelines were approved, some weren't. We talk about it being environmentally sensitive and having the social license, but we know that for one, it seemed to be more of a political decision than the other, and so I still question the motives of why some were, or why the one pipeline was disapproved, but you know, we can always hope for better.
Well, okay. That's it for the time. We don't have time for anything else, so appreciate you coming in, and you did very well for your parents.
Hi, Mom and Dad.
Hi, Mom and Dad.
See you next week.
Thanks.
Thank you.